Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you everyone for coming. So my name is Lorraine Farrelly, and I'm head of the new Department of Architecture and Built Environment. My talk today is about empowering and building community. The University of York has a commitment to public good for students to apply learning to social benefit, and this is what attracted me to come and set up a new Department of Architecture and Built Environment, which will be a professional education for public good. So architecture in general, both in terms of education and practice, there can sometimes be a lack of public or end user involvement in design. But there is an approach to architecture which can be empowering for everyone involved. Empowering for communities. So it can be something other than a service for wealthy and commercial clients. I'm sure you've all seen grand designs, and there are lots of stories on there about individual houses that people get involved with. But there's another approach to architecture, which is how it can be transformative for the communities it involves, how it can actually support communities to develop systems, ideas, and modes of operation for groups across society. And that's something that's really important to me. How can we ensure that students learn about this inclusive approach to design? And this image here is a project that I've been involved with in Radstock in Somerset, which became a student project. So here I've been working with some collaborators, and we were developing some approaches to how they could develop their site, which was a forest school. And so from the very start, we're involved with the client group, with the community who are going to be impacted by that architecture. So co-design is a really important aspect of empowering building community. And co-design is really a participatory approach to designing solutions, working collaboratively, facilitating some sort of change that all stakeholders in a project can actually be involved with. And I'm going to talk about some examples of both from educational research context of this idea of co-design and how it can impact various organisations and groups. And the images there are a project which I developed with some undergraduate students at the University of Reading, where I was before I came to York. And the students worked together to build a structure on campus, which was actually used by some of theatre students as their performance space for the end of year show. So, some research. The research I've been doing has been around looking at community consultation engagement, and there is a lack of inclusive consultation. Really how to ensure that people, community groups feel that they can be involved. And this is something that the government have been looking at in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. How can community groups be much more involved in their future? And these are some images of a project I ran in a local community in Reading to get them to come along and to feel that they could have a voice in the future of their town, the development of Reading Town Centre. So the research project that I've been involved with was a collaboration between the universities of Reading, Ulster, Edinburgh and Cardiff. And we were looking at community consultation across the 4 nations of the UK. It was an AHRC funded project, which is Arts Humanities Research Council. And the aims of the project were to try and understand how could we provide a place for the community to have a voice in local consultation, formal consultation. How could we ensure that this place provided an environment which was inclusive and representative, a place where communities could consult, but also to foster the idea of ongoing civic debate. So this image here is actually a report that I've been involved with. And from that research has come a series of outcomes, because it's just finished in December last year. So there's a national report from each of the 4 nations on community consultation. I wrote the English report, and we've also produced a series of tools, toolkits and other information to support people who are interested in getting involved in consultation. So some of the proposals that that have emerged from the report is really to try and ensure that consultation with communities is both digital, online, but also some community groups feel excluded if things are digital. So having some sort of physical environment where people can come along and comment is really important. Another proposal from the research is that it's important that we produce some sort of platform to share best practice, so that all the work that's being done, I know there's a lot of work being done in York on community consultation, that there's a place that can be shared and we can share best practice. And then there's another proposal, which is local authorities. It would be very beneficial if there was a local permanent space where people could go and find out about what's happening in their community. Somewhere that would support early and timely engagement and consultation. And we ran pop-up spaces in all of the communities we were involved with, and people really appreciated the ability to come in and get involved and see what was happening. Some of these type of physical spaces can be called urban rooms, which is a place where communities come together and they talk about what's happening in their community in terms of built environment, but also in terms of other important community issues. Another outcome from the research was actually to think about how a toolkit could support communities who are doing community engagement in a way that to ensure that that engagement is inclusive. And there are a series of steps here. This is all available online for anyone who's interested, which describe some of the principles about how to make an engagement inclusive, including the concept of co-design, which I mentioned earlier, also about continuing conversations with community groups. So they're not just abandoned, they're actually part of the feedback process in terms of when a project has been delivered. So this toolkit was one of the outcomes of our research. And then another outcome was a code of practice for community consultation. So this was really to encourage those people who are developing and designing consultation, how can they actually do something in a way which is inclusive? And these are some of the proposals about how that could work, essentially about being accountable, being inclusive, but also this concept of feeding back to the community group. And again, this is all available online for anyone who's interested. So how does this inform an architecture curriculum? So I think there's a lot of principles there that we could possibly think about in terms of how that could inform an architecture curriculum. But the requirements of an architecture curriculum, the responsibilities are to really build buildings that are safe and fit for purpose. But also there are really important society issues we should consider. There's a really important aspect about climate awareness. Students need to be aware of the implications of designing buildings, sustainability. Concepts of safe design. There are new building codes now about life and fire safety, which mean that our students need to design buildings safely. But we also want our students to engage with society. We want them to understand those community engagement concepts that I was mentioning earlier. And wrapping all of that is this idea of professionalism. So an architecture school can focus on context and place as well as form. And that's something that we're interested to develop in our curriculum as we're developing the architecture department. Also about those processes of how you deliver good buildings. Also, an architecture school can contribute to the quality of life of the local community and support the creation of livable cities and towns. So those are some of the principles we're using to design our curriculum as we go forwards. And I just want to show you some examples of some of the work I've been doing with students. So these are some projects I ran at the University of Reading. Essentially, this project, we worked with an arts group called Open Hand, Open Space Arts, and they were interested to have a pavilion at the end of their summer for a show. And we worked with them to design a structure, also to develop funding for that structure to support it, and then our students actually built it with them. So from this project, our students are learning about how to work with the clients, they're learning about aspects of dealing with some of the problems of delivering a project on site, and they're also literally learning about how to assemble and build a structure. So these principles of students learning from the start to the end of a project are something we're going to be incorporating in our curriculum. Another example here, so going back to the very first image I showed you about the nursery school, it was a forest school in Somerset. Our students, I had a master's studio, and the master's students worked with me and with some architects, and we developed a master plan for the site for the Forest School. One of the challenges they had for the children, because Forest School is an outside learning space, is they didn't have anywhere that they could shelter for their kitchen. So we actually designed and developed a community kitchen for them. Again, we helped them raise the funding, and we built this structure on site. And again, our students were understanding aspects of construction making and also how to work with a range of client groups. And this last project is some work that I've been doing with some collaborators who are architects called Studio Bad. And they do a lot of work with church groups. And so these images here sort of demonstrate the process of what we've been doing with the church groups. A lot of challenges that local church groups have are around how can they heat their churches. There are real issues around paying bills for heating. And so we needed to work with them to understand what the challenges were. And part of the project that we developed with them was to initially sit with them, listen to what they had to say, and together we came up with some ideas of how we could adapt their space to make it a space that was sustainable for them, both in terms of how they use the space, but also how it could work economically for them. And so this process is working with a group, understanding and listening to them, and then from that comes a project brief, and then from that comes a solution, hopefully, to some of their issues and problems. So the idea of this presentation was to introduce where we are in terms of developing the architecture department, the architecture and built environment department, but also to talk about some of the research work that's underpinning that. And also it's an invitation. If any of you have got ideas about projects that you think you could collaborate with us in terms of our students learning through making, we're welcoming new students from September 2025. And we'd really like to partner with local community groups on projects where we can co-design. It could be a structure, but it could also be a process or an event. And through that collaboration working with you, we're interested that our students then have some real understanding of real-world projects and real-world issues. Thank you very much.